Hello, I'm Richard Fletcher from the Family Action Centre, the Faculty of Health at the University of Newcastle, and this is a brief presentation around father-child rough and tumble play. Father-child rough and tumble play, we would say, can help fathers bond with their children, and that's both boys and girls from our own research. We haven't seen a great deal of difference, some subtle differences, but not a great deal in the enthusiasm of the children and the way that dads do rough and tumble with them. These are preschoolers we've been looking at. We think also that father-child rough and tumble play can encourage children to be active and, very importantly, can build a child's self-regulation, and I'll just explain why that's so important in a minute. It's part of bonding or connection between fathers and their children, and bonding we're used to thinking of in the professional literature as focused on attachment as safety and comfort. So you can see the dad helping the small child on the left there. But there is a second aspect to bonding, and that's to do with exploration and taking risks. And this is where fathers particularly, we would say, have a role. This is a photo from some young men, friends of mine, and when I showed them this photo, told them I was using it to illustrate taking a risk, their comment was, wait a minute, there's no risk, there's no rocks down there. So of course risk is a relative thing, and it's to do with your perception, and often the perception of mothers and fathers about risks differ, and that's an important element of fathers' rough and tumble play with children. Children themselves, of course, do rough and tumble play, explore relationships, explore the capabilities of their bodies. In human societies, we often mistake rough and tumble play for fighting, but as we'll see, there's a distinct difference. Because mammals, all the mammals, we're mammals, all the mammals engage in rough and tumble play. So the animals you can see on the screen here, all of them have a special way of relating when they're juveniles, where it's clear, because we can study animals in a way that we can't study humans, we're able to make very detailed observations of how they go about this sort of play. And in each case it's clear that there are signals that the animals are giving each other that this is not fighting. Even dolphins, for example, emit a different frequency noise when they're doing rough and tumble play, where they bump each other, compared to when they're fighting. Because we can see what mammals do clearly, we can develop a description of rough and tumble play, so that involves all of these things. And the key features, I've already mentioned that it's different from fighting. The key differences are that rough and tumble play involves dominance swapping. So if one animal is bigger or stronger or faster than the other, and they start doing rough and tumble play, there will need to be dominance swapping. So the person who's the stronger or bigger or faster will have to deliberately let themselves lose in the contest. And if that doesn't happen, then it's no longer rough and tumble play, it's just one bigger, stronger animal beating up another. The signals I've mentioned, and that's what tells us, these two features, what tell us that it's different from fighting. Rats, for example, you can see these two rats are engaged in rough and tumble play. With rats it's very clear, because when they're playing, that's as these two rats are here, they try and bite each other on the neck. But when they're really fighting, they don't try for each other's neck, they try for each other's legs. And it's very clear when they're playing. It seems counterintuitive, but the neck is the area where they play. And being rats, you can raise them in particular environments that you control. So for example, when litters of rats were separated, the litter was split up, and half of them were raised so that they could touch through a mesh and smell each other as they were growing up, but they couldn't play physically. And then the other half of the litter were allowed to rough and tumble play as they grew up. As adults, they noticed that the ones who hadn't been allowed to play had poorer social skills, they got into more fights, and they weren't so good at problem solving. Also, because they're rats, you can cut their brains in half and have a look, and we could see, or rather the researchers involved could see, that those who were allowed to rough and tumble play seem to have altered DNA methylation in their brain. So the actual rough and tumble play experience, we think, alters what happens in your brain. And generally we know that infants and children's interactions, we would say, is what builds their brain. So this is not a surprising finding in a sense. In humans, however, there's a difference, because young humans play with each other, but young humans have the longest period of dependency and development compared to all the other mammals. We've got a much longer period of dependency, and during that time human youngsters rough and tumble with their adults, parents, and particularly in our community with fathers. They start around 2 and 3 years of age when they've got the motor coordination to do it. It's usually the father. Some families we've talked to, it's not the father, the mum does it and not the dad, so it's not universal, but that's the usual situation. And we think that rough tumble play can help children's self-regulation. Self-control is the other word for that. Self-control is a big deal, or self-regulation, because that's what decides whether you can pay attention and whether you can switch your attention from one thing to another, and you can stop yourself doing something. So you can imagine all of those things that develop, particularly when children start this rough and tumble play, that is in the preschool period. All of these things are essential if children are going to be successful when they get to school, for example. Not being able to pay attention to something, even if you want to. So this is not about being disobedient deliberately. This is about when children are trying to pay attention, but they get easily distracted. When they can't resist looking at one thing or the child across the room who's doing something, and even if they're trying to complete the task in front of them. So, and not doing something like not talking or not putting up your hand or not jumping out of your seat, all of these things are self-regulatory behaviours that are essential for doing well in school. And we realise that this involves emotion and brain power, and that's why self-regulation and rough and tumble play go together. Humans who lack self-control or self-regulation tend to get into fights. Not only don't they do well in school, but they have these other unfortunate outcomes, including early death. Father-child rough and tumble play starts between 2 and 3 years of age. We have recently published a measure of quality rough and tumble play, which roughly means that the father notices where the child is up to, doesn't play in an automatic way. So it's not about simply avoiding the child going too far and bursting into tears or getting hurt. That's not what consists of quality rough and tumble play. There's more to it than that. And it's, of course, sensitive to where the child's up to. Some dads are reading their child very well and keeping their energy levels at the right level so they don't go over the top or they don't get bored. And it involves intense learning of self-regulation. This is a heightened period of excitement. We think it operates by changing patterns in the child's brain, as we imagine other interactions do with mothers and fathers. This is one area that particularly we think is important. And there's a chapter on fathers' physical play in this book, which is highly recommended by me, of course. And thank you.